That night felt perfect, almost too perfect. The chandeliers dripped golden light over the tables, soft jazz wrapped around us like silk, and the air smelled faintly of truffle butter and wine. I laughed easily, resting my hand on Robert's arm, feeling proud and calm in the warmth of our friend's company. To everyone watching, we were the couple people envied, composed, successful, unbreakable. Then Robert lifted his glass and smiled that charming, practiced smile of his. To success, friendship, and the woman who stood by me through everything, my beautiful wife, Amara. The table erupted in applause and teasing. I smiled back at him, feeling that mix of affection and quiet admiration. He always knew how to hold a room. He'd been doing it since the day I met him. Maybe that's what first drew me in, that effortless confidence. For a brief moment, I forgot about the cracks beneath the surface, the times I'd wondered if his affection was performance or truth. That night, I decided not to question anything. It was supposed to be a celebration. Of us, of our life, of everything we'd built together. But then, everything shifted. The laughter softened, the air thickened, and I felt it before I saw it. That strange, creeping tension. A woman in a red dress walked in, her heels clicking like punctuation against the marble floor. Every head turned as she moved closer. And before I could even process what was happening, she leaned in and kissed Robert, on the lips, right in front of me, our friends, and an entire room of witnesses. The sound of that kiss silenced everything. My world stopped on impact. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. The entire restaurant blurred, as if the world had tilted slightly off balance. Her lipstick smeared faintly on his mouth, red, bold, deliberate. I remember thinking how the color didn't suit him. Then the whisper started. Chairs shifted. Someone gasped. I sat frozen, my fingers tightening around the stem of my glass until it trembled. "Robert?" I heard myself say, though my voice sounded far away like it belonged to someone else. He blinked, wide-eyed and pale, his charm shattering in real time. "Lydia? What are you doing?" The name hit me like a cold wave. Lydia. I'd heard it before, once, in passing, in a story he said didn't matter. My heart pounded, trying to make sense of what my eyes refused to accept. She smiled at him, calm, almost amused. "Oh," she said softly, "I didn't realize you were still together." Still together. The words cut deeper than any confession could. I felt the heat rise in my chest, not from anger yet, but humiliation. Every eye in that restaurant was on me. The devoted wife, suddenly the fool in a red-lipped play she never auditioned for. Robert reached for her arm, his voice low and desperate. "Leave. Now." But it was too late. The damage had already bloomed like a stain that couldn't be scrubbed out. She straightened, unapologetic, while he fumbled for words that didn't exist. I forced myself to sit still, to breathe, to hold what was left of my dignity in trembling hands. On the surface, I was quiet. Inside, a storm began to take shape, silent, deliberate, and deadly. When Lydia finally walked away, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Conversation stumbled, laughter died mid-sentence, and I could feel every set of eyes flicking between Robert and me. He muttered apologies, excuses that tangled in his throat, but I couldn't hear him anymore. My ears rang, my chest burned, and my thoughts blurred into one endless hum. Everyone saw. Every single person. I didn't just lose trust in that moment. I lost the image of who we were supposed to be. I stood up, forcing my chair back with quiet finality. The legs screeched against the marble floor, and that sound alone silenced what little chatter remained. Robert reached for my hand, whispering, "Amara, please." but I pulled away. "Don't," I said, barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to stop him cold. My heels echoed as I walked toward the exit, each step heavier, louder, until I was outside, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. I could taste salt, maybe from tears I hadn't realized were there. Behind me, through the glass doors, I could see him, shoulders slumped, trying to salvage what couldn't be saved. The people inside avoided his gaze, the way one avoids a car crash they can't unsee. I stood by the car, staring at my reflection in the window. My lipstick was flawless, my smile long gone. "You made me your fool once," I whispered to my reflection. "That's the last time." And in that quiet, trembling promise, something inside me shifted. Not broken, but reborn into resolve. The night air clung to me like smoke as I left that restaurant, each breath heavy with disbelief. I could still hear the muted chatter inside, the whispers, the pitying looks, and it made my stomach turn. I walked faster, my heels clicking like a countdown to something inevitable. Robert followed me out, his voice slicing through the chaos behind us. "Amara, please just listen," he begged, reaching for my arm. I turned sharply, the car keys trembling in my hand. "Listen to what, Robert? To lies reheated and served as truth?" His face fell, color draining from it. For once, the man who always had the perfect words had none. "It's not what it looked like," he stammered, desperate, almost childlike in tone. I stared at him. This man I thought I knew, standing there under the restaurant's golden lights that suddenly felt cruel, almost mocking. "Then tell me what it was," I said, each word slow and deliberate. "Because that woman kissed you like she's done it before." He looked away, jaw tightening. The silence between us said more than he ever could. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "It was a mistake, a long time ago. It meant nothing." I almost laughed. Nothing. That's what he called the kiss that dismantled my life in front of a crowd. "She said she didn't know we were still together, Robert. That doesn't sound like nothing to me." His eyes flickered with guilt, a kind I'd seen only once before, when he lied about a deal years back. He exhaled, defeated. "I was trying to end things. She misunderstood." My heart broke not for what he said, but for how rehearsed it sounded. I stood there, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement, my hands trembling even though I refused to let him see it. "You didn't just break my trust, Robert," I said quietly. "You humiliated me. In front of everyone." He stepped closer, his voice cracking as he tried to explain. But all I could see were flashes of that kiss. Her red dress, the look in her eyes, the silence that followed. It replayed over and over like some cruel film I couldn't pause. For every word he tried to justify, I had 1,000 memories unraveling inside me. He reached out again, desperate, his breath visible in the cool night air. "Amara, please, I made a mistake. I can fix this." The words hit me like static, loud but meaningless. I used to believe him when he said things like that. I used to think love could repair anything if you wanted it badly enough. But standing there, under the glow of the restaurant lights, I realized love wasn't supposed to make you feel small. It wasn't supposed to make you defend your dignity. "Go home, Robert," I said finally, voice calm, detached. "But not with me." I turned, my heels crunching against gravel as I walked toward the car. Behind me, I heard him call my name, again and again, until his voice cracked into silence. The drive home was a blur of headlights and tears I refused to let fall. My wedding ring caught the dashboard light, glinting like a cruel reminder of what I thought was forever. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply drove, straight into the beginning of the end. When I finally parked in our driveway, the house looked different. colder, emptier. It was strange how betrayal could alter everything, even the color of the walls. I sat there for a long time, engine humming softly, my reflection staring back at me from the rearview mirror. My mascara had smudged, but I didn't care. What haunted me most wasn't the kiss itself. It was the ease with which he lied afterward, as if deception had become second nature. I thought of every late meeting, every vague explanation, every night he said he was too tired to talk. The puzzle pieces began to fit. Inside, the scent of his cologne still lingered, warm, musky, familiar. I stood in the middle of our living room, surrounded by framed photos of smiles that suddenly felt staged. I touched one, the two of us on vacation, sunburned and laughing, and I felt something twist inside me. It wasn't pain anymore. It was resolve. The kind that sits quietly in your chest, waiting. I took off my wedding ring, placed it on the mantel, and whispered to the empty room, "You made me your fool once. That's the last time." Then I walked upstairs, not as a broken woman, but as someone awakening from a long, delusional dream. My mind was steady now, methodical. I wasn't going to shout or throw things or beg for answers. No, I'd get them my way, carefully, quietly, and completely. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something simple and terrifying. The game had already begun. He just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was still, too still, like it was holding its breath. Robert had already left for work, or maybe he'd just chosen to leave early to avoid me. Either way, I didn't care. I made myself coffee, the bitter taste grounding me, the steam curling up like silent applause for my newfound composure. That was the thing about me. People mistook my quiet for weakness. They always had. But silence is where I think best, and that morning, my mind was already at work. I didn't cry. I didn't break things. I didn't call my friends to vent. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the same table where we'd planned vacations, birthdays, anniversaries. Now I was planning something else, the reconstruction of truth. I started with the simplest clues, our phone bill. My pulse quickened when I saw it, late-night calls to a number I didn't recognize, a number labeled Lydia, the same name that had shattered my world 2 nights before. My hand tightened around the mug, but I didn't spill a drop. By midday, I'd gone from phone records to emails. He'd hidden them under a fake business folder. Lazy, arrogant, predictable. The messages weren't poetic or romantic. They were transactional. Hotel confirmations, dinner reservations. Money transfers labeled consulting. The audacity almost made me laugh. He wasn't just unfaithful, he was careless. And in his carelessness, he handed me the rope I'd use to pull him down. I whispered to myself, steady and deliberate, "You didn't just betray me, Robert. You funded your own destruction." I spent hours piecing it all together, every transaction and timestamp forming a map of deceit. It was almost poetic, how the very routine he used to hide his lies became the trail that exposed them. Between emails and receipts, I began to see the rhythm of his double life. Tuesday dinners that matched business trips, Friday payments that coincided with late meetings. And all the while I'd been home, making dinner, waiting, believing. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was logistical, rehearsed, efficient. He'd built an entire system to keep me in the dark. When he came home that night, I was sitting on the sofa, legs crossed, calm as ever. He greeted me like nothing had happened, kissed my forehead, asked about my day. I nodded, pretending to listen, while my heart beat in steady, measured silence. Every smile I gave him was a strategy now. Every word, a step closer to something deliberate. I wasn't ready to confront him yet, not until I could control the outcome. And that meant knowing everything, down to the last cent and secret. After he went to bed, I sat alone under the soft hum of the living room light, scrolling through the evidence one last time. Each email, each payment, each lie, they no longer hurt. They fueled me. The woman who cried over betrayal was gone. What remained was methodical, focused, dangerous in her stillness. I backed up the files, labeled them neatly, and whispered into the quiet, "You built this empire on deceit, Robert. I'm just rearranging the foundation." The next morning, I met with my lawyer, a woman named Claire, sharp as glass and calm as a storm about to break. She listened without interrupting as I laid everything out, the calls, the emails, the transfers. Her pen moved quickly, her eyes steady on mine. "You've done half my job already," she said finally, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Once you've gathered everything, we'll file. But if you want to hit him where it hurts, his reputation, I can help you plan that too." I sipped my coffee slowly, feeling the heat slide down my throat like courage. "No," I said softly. "I'll handle the reputation part myself." Claire raised an eyebrow, intrigued but not surprised. "Then you're smarter than most clients I meet," she said. Maybe I was. Or maybe I'd just spent too many years being underestimated. When I left her office, the city felt different. Brighter somehow, more in focus. I walked past shop windows and caught my reflection. Steady eyes, unshaken hands. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a strategist. I wasn't healing, I was building. That night, Robert noticed something had changed. I laughed when he spoke, listened when he lied, and kissed him goodnight like nothing had happened. He looked relieved, even hopeful. And I let him believe it. Because the truth was simple. The storm hadn't passed. It was forming quietly behind my smile. And when it arrived, he'd never see it coming. A week later, I suggested we host another dinner. The same group, same restaurant. I said it was time to clear the air, to make amends for the awkward scene no one could stop talking about. Robert hesitated at first, his ego still bruised, but I saw the relief flicker in his eyes. "Thank you, Amara," he said, voice soft, cautious. "It means a lot that you're willing to fix this." I smiled, the kind that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Of course," I replied. "Some things deserve to be put to rest properly." He didn't realize the irony. That's exactly what I intended to do. The following days passed in a blur of polite smiles and quiet planning. I made the calls myself, confirming guests, reserving the same table, ensuring every detail mirrored that first, unforgettable night. I wanted him comfortable, predictable. I wanted him to believe in our reconciliation long enough to let his guard down. Each time he thanked me for trying, I nodded sweetly, wondering if he'd still thank me when he saw what I had prepared. Revenge, I learned, doesn't need fire. It burns better when it's cold. But there was one more thing to arrange, the final guest. I called Lydia, my voice steady, almost warm. "I just want to talk," I told her, woman to woman. "Maybe we can both move on peacefully." There was a pause on the line, a flicker of suspicion. "You're not angry?" she asked. I smiled at the question, my fingers drumming softly on the table. "No," I said. "I'm done being angry. I just want closure." And she believed me. That was her mistake. After that call, I sat back in silence, listening to the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Every sound in that house felt amplified now. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, even Robert's laugh from the other room as he spoke on the phone. It was almost poetic, how he could still sound so at ease while his world stood on the edge of collapse. I poured myself a glass of wine and stared out the window. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't conflicted. I was steady, the kind of steady that comes from knowing exactly what must be done. In the days that followed, I rehearsed every detail. The seating arrangement, the lighting, even the placement of the wine glasses. I wanted it all to look familiar, comfortable, a perfect illusion of forgiveness. When Robert told me he'd invited his partners again, I pretended to be pleased. "Good," I said softly, brushing his sleeve. "They should see us getting back to normal." He kissed my cheek, unaware of the quiet satisfaction curling inside me. Every move he made, every lie he told, was another step into the trap he couldn't see. At night, I would lie awake, tracing the ceiling with my eyes, thinking of the moment when everything would unravel. Not for me this time, but for him. I pictured the faces around that table, the silence, the shock, and I knew exactly what I wanted to say when it happened. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration, reclaiming my dignity, my voice, my control. He'd chosen deceit. I chose theater. And when the curtain rose, every truth he'd buried would take center stage. By the night before the dinner, everything was in motion. The restaurant manager, who'd seen it all unfold weeks earlier, didn't question my reservation, though I caught the faint curiosity in his eyes. I gave him my most gracious smile and said, "Same table, please." He nodded, unaware that the table itself was part of the story now, like a stage waiting for its final act. When I returned home, Robert was in the study, polishing his cufflinks, humming softly to himself. He thought the night would repair what he'd broken. I let him believe that. Belief was a powerful leash. Lydia, on the other hand, sent one final message confirming she'd come. "I think it's brave of you to reach out," she wrote. I stared at the text for a moment, then typed back. "Bravery looks different for everyone." She had no idea how true that was. There was no anger left in me, only precision, a sense of purpose that felt almost holy. My revenge wasn't about rage. It was about balance. The universe had tilted once. I was simply correcting it. That night, as I laid out my dress, the same elegant black one I wore at the first dinner, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My expression was calm, almost serene. I thought about the woman I'd been weeks ago, trusting, patient, endlessly forgiving. She was gone. What remained was someone sharper, quieter, and infinitely stronger. Tomorrow night, I would end the story Robert had written for me, and start my own. The night of the dinner arrived wrapped in a strange stillness, the kind that settles before a storm. I got ready slowly, deliberately, choosing the same perfume Robert once said reminded him of home. Tonight, it would remind him of consequence. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the wounded wife anymore. I saw a woman about to deliver her final line, one measured, rehearsed, and earned. By the time we reached the restaurant, my pulse was steady. The chandeliers still cast their golden glow, the same as before, but tonight, they didn't soften me. They illuminated the battlefield. Robert looked nervous, though he tried to hide it behind his smile. He greeted our friends, shook hands, and ordered the same wine, hoping routine would restore what was already gone. I played my part flawlessly, warm, composed, attentive. I even laughed at his jokes. Across the table, our friends seemed relieved, their eyes darting between us with cautious optimism. They wanted a happy ending, something to reassure them that love could survive public humiliation. I let them have that illusion. For now. Then, just as the first course arrived, I saw her. Lydia. She entered wearing that same red dress, confidence still painted across her face. Robert's fork froze mid-air. "What is she doing here?" he whispered, his voice cracking slightly. I smiled, serene and composed. "Oh, I invited her," I said, turning to the others. "Robert said it was all just a misunderstanding, so I thought we could clear that up. Together." His face drained of color. The show had begun. For a moment, no one moved. The air grew thick, the kind of silence that hums before something breaks. Lydia glanced at Robert, confusion flickering across her face. "Wait, what's going on?" she asked softly, scanning the table. Robert's hand trembled as he tried to compose himself. "Amara, this isn't—" But I cut him off, sliding a neat stack of papers across the table. "For everyone who's been wondering what that kiss was about," I said, my tone calm but unyielding, "here's your answer." I watched their eyes move over the pages, printed emails, bank statements, transfers marked consulting. Every lie, itemized. The shock around the table was almost physical. Robert's business partner leaned back, his face twisted in disgust. Lydia's confidence crumbled. Her lips parted as she whispered, "You printed our emails?" I looked at her, my voice quiet but steady. "You walked into my life uninvited once. I thought it was only fair to return the favor." She tried to stand, but I wasn't done. "Sit down, Lydia," I said. Not a threat, a command. And she did. The woman in red finally looked small. Robert's mask cracked completely. "You planned this?" he spat, his voice shaking with rage and embarrassment. "You humiliated me." I leaned forward, meeting his eyes without flinching. "No, Robert. You did that yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it." The murmurs started again. Soft gasps, awkward glances, the clinking of untouched glasses. I could feel my pulse steadying, my control absolute. This wasn't revenge for its own sake. It was revelation. Robert stood there, red-faced and trembling, his voice cracking as he tried to salvage whatever dignity he had left. "You'll regret this," he shouted, his hand slamming against the table hard enough to rattle the glasses. But I didn't flinch. I lifted my own glass slowly, feeling the cool stem between my fingers. "No, Robert," I said, my voice calm, almost tender. "You will." I raised the wine to my lips and took a quiet sip as he stormed out, the restaurant watching in silence. The sound of the door slamming felt like closure, sharp, final, and deeply satisfying. Around the table, no one spoke. My friends, his colleagues, all frozen in that perfect mix of shock and awkward respect. One of them, the same man who'd teased Robert weeks ago, finally broke the silence. "Amara," he said quietly, "you didn't have to do that." I smiled faintly, eyes still fixed on the door. "You're right," I answered, "but I wanted to." And that was the truth, pure, unpolished, liberating. I wasn't looking for pity. I wanted clarity. And that night, I got it. When I finally stood to leave, the weight I'd carried for weeks lifted with each step. Outside, the night air felt softer somehow, cooler, cleaner. I looked up at the city lights and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not the fragile kind that comes from pretending everything's fine, but the real kind that comes after you've burned every illusion to the ground. Behind me, laughter resumed inside the restaurant, faint and distant. Ahead of me, there was silence and freedom. Months passed, and the noise around what happened eventually faded, at least for everyone else. For me, it became background music to a new rhythm. I poured myself into my work, rebuilding piece by piece, until I no longer recognized the woman who once sat frozen at that dinner table. I started my own event planning company, and the irony wasn't lost on me when my first major client chose the same restaurant, that restaurant, for their celebration. As I walked through its doors again, the place didn't haunt me anymore. It felt smaller somehow, contained. I'd reclaimed it, just like I reclaimed myself. The staff greeted me differently this time, not with pity, but with respect. The hostess smiled warmly, unaware of what this room once meant to me, and led me to the corner table where laughter now belonged to someone else's story. The scent of wine, the sound of clinking glasses, the music, all of it used to sting. But now it felt like background noise to a new beginning. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And that realization was its own quiet triumph. As the event went on, I caught my reflection in a nearby window, confident, composed, entirely my own. The woman I saw wasn't waiting for anyone's loyalty, apology, or validation. She'd found something far more valuable: peace that couldn't be shaken, and pride that couldn't be bought. I smiled at her, at me, knowing that the story I'd once lived through now existed only as a lesson, not a wound. One afternoon, as I was leaving a meeting, I saw him, Robert, across the street. For a second, the world seemed to slow down. He looked smaller somehow, shrunken under the weight of his own undoing. The sharp suits were gone, his once polished shoes were scuffed, and the light in his eyes had dimmed. He hesitated before crossing the road, his voice unsteady when he finally reached me. "Amara," he said, almost whispering. "I lost everything." I didn't answer at first. I just looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I felt nothing. Not anger, not longing. Just peace. "I made a mistake," he said. "Please, I need you." His words fell flat, lifeless. I shook my head slowly, my voice soft but certain. "Mistakes are accidents, Robert. You made choices." He blinked, speechless, as if he'd never considered that distinction before. The silence between us was thick, full of everything he'd taken for granted, and everything I'd reclaimed. He tried again, almost pleading. "I just want another chance." I smiled, not cruelly, but with the kind of compassion that comes only after closure. "You had one," I said gently, "the night you kissed your career goodbye." For a long moment we stood there, two strangers connected only by what used to be. Then I stepped aside, letting him pass. The city swallowed him up, just another man lost in the crowd. I turned toward the sunlight, feeling the warmth touch my face, and for the first time in years, I felt completely free. That evening, I met friends for dinner, laughter spilling across the table, wine glasses catching the golden light, the sound of joy filling every corner of the room. It struck me how different the same setting could feel once you've reclaimed your power. The clinking of glass, the smell of roasted herbs, the hum of soft conversation. All of it was mine now, untainted, unburdened. I caught myself smiling, not out of pride or revenge, but out of deep, grounded peace. Healing doesn't announce itself. It just arrives quietly, one breath at a time. Later, walking home through the soft glow of the city, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the humiliation, the fire I'd had to build to rise from it. I realized that pain, in its strange way, had been my teacher. It stripped away what was false and showed me what I was capable of when I stopped waiting to be saved. I didn't need Robert's apology or anyone's approval. My freedom wasn't something he could take or give. It was mine all along. I'd just forgotten how to claim it. And if life has a sense of poetry, it's this: that the night he lost his pride was the night I found my strength. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had something far greater: clarity. As I reached my door, the city alive around me, I whispered to myself, that night he lost his pride. I lost my patience. But in the end, I gained something far greater: my freedom. And this time, it wasn't a promise. It was a truth already lived.